Okay, let's see if we can wrap this up. This one is on alternative livelihood. The biggest part of our adaptation will always be to make sure that people feel comfortable changing their lives for climate change adaptation, and that can only happen if they are assured of livelihood, or they, there are many details there. Poor people move more easily because they have not much to pack up and don't have much assets that are fixed, whereas rich people are more easy to move because they have enough resources to start somewhere else. It's the vast middle that may get hung up on how much they can change their lives, whether it's moving or shifting livelihoods, shifting crops, and so on and so forth. So these ideas on adaptation for alternative livelihoods is always critical. Again, it'll be very region specific, very context specific, very local, and so on. Let's look at community-based tourism as a strategy for building climate resilience in Bhutan. Bhutan, is very strict about allowing tourists. In fact, with the US passport, you will pay almost $250 per day just as a fee, and I think you pay it for 4 days at least. So if you stay more than 4 days, you end up paying $1,000, and so on and so forth. So they are very careful about their land, but maybe that's also a good way to make money from tourism. But this is more about community-based tourism as climate resilience. Climate change is affecting the rural households whose primary livelihood is agriculture in Bhutan. Community tourism can benefit rural households and provide alternative source of livelihood. Households from community that received community tourism program are more likely to have better household wealth, i.e. number of rooms, vehicle ownerships, and so on. Bhutan is a fairly poor country. I have some breeze again. Let's see if sound will be okay. In this chapter, the conclusion here is, in this chapter we examined how community tourism initiatives in rural Bhutan enabled households to cope with the effect of changing climate, which is often more exacerbated in fragile mountain ecosystems. Using the household census in Bhutan, we used propensity score matching to examine the effect of community tourism on locally important household wealth indicators. Our results showed that households from the community that received the community tourism initiatives are about 5% more likely to have more rooms and are also about 5% more likely to own a vehicle or car. This improvement in wealth indicators may indicate a reduction in the household's dependence on agriculture, and hence this may be an indication that community tourism initiatives in Bhutan may be contributing towards building household resilience to climate change by diversifying income sources away from climate-threatened agriculture. So at national level, we need to worry about fiscal policies and budget planning, etc. for adaptation, but this is about household level resilience to climate change by diversifying incomes through this community-based tourism. Let me close the window because now the breeze is getting a bit strong. So I closed the window, but now it's gonna get hot pretty quickly, so I have to this is life. Okay, so let's move to another example. Climate change, ecological stress, and livelihood choices in Indian Sundarban. Sundarban is the Bay of Bengal, beautiful place with lots of mangrove forests and Bengal tigers, lots of fisheries, lots of very unique livelihoods there. The key messages from this study, I'll just get the pointer up. The younger generation from Indian Sundarban Delta is mostly opting for migrant labor jobs outside the region. Individual educational attainment is found to have an inverse relation with the activities like fish and crab collection. Education enables the local youth to gather more information and to move outward. This is also true for agriculture. Not many people stay and continue the farming business, especially if the land gets split between multiple siblings and you have a little chunk of land. people tend to give the land for managing or farming to somebody else who doesn't have land. Then they go off and often live in urban centers as laborers or auto drivers or taxi drivers and so on. So this is the same for Sundarbans as well. A policy of incentivizing and facilitating basic education among youth in these remote rural areas may increase their livelihood resilience and help in reducing ecological stress. So you are trying to do multiple things here. Is it bad if people get education and leave? If you want them to leave and somehow reduce ecological stress, protect the Sundarbans, and reduce impact on climate and so on, how do you do it? Do you educate people and find ways to diversify their incomes and allow them to stay in Sundarbans and have a decent life, or just leave? And if they leave, whose fault it is? So, conclusions and policy implications of this study. Sundarban is a very important geographical region both for the ecological health of the Bay of Bengal and the millions of poor people in Bangladesh and India that inhabit the area. Its geographical and ecological aspects have been studied over the last several decades. The region caught the fancy of the research community with climate change related vulnerabilities identified for its large resident population. On the Indian side, the region is also witness to significant dynamics in livelihood owing to availability of mobile communication and transport infrastructure in recent years. So economic development comes with some unintended consequences, of course. Yes, yet studies on these livelihood dynamics supported by micro-level data are scarce in the literature. This study bridges this crucial research gap by using information from several rounds of household surveys that were conducted in the Indian part of the Sundarban over the last decade. The majority of the sample observations belong to the peripheral hamlets of Sundarban Reserve Forest. The pooled data of 2,800 households and over 5,500 adult earning members unfolds an interesting story of people's resilience in the face of climate change induced loss in their traditional livelihood. The study finds strong empirical evidence suggesting that the younger generation in the Delta is coping with the situation by moving out of the region as migrant labor. As I said, migrant labor means they are out for part of the year depending on the employment and so on, and then they are back for some reason, some part of the year. A lot of socio-economic implications for this in terms of impact on women, children, family, and whether men, when they go as migrant laborers, they pick up bad habits like drinking or gambling, or often also pick up diseases by visiting sexual workers and so on. Such livelihood dynamics might be considered ecologically beneficial as it reduces the anthropogenic stress on the mangrove ecosystem. So main goal will be to protect the mangrove ecosystem, but then people dependent on it have to be properly trained, incentivized, provided income options that serve the purpose of protecting the mangrove system. Okay. Finally, adaptation to climate change by vegetable farmers in Sri Lanka. Farmer characteristics such as gender, education level, and willingness to take credit influence resilience to climate change. Availability of updated climate information and improved extension services are instrumental in effective adaptation. Networking of farmers for initiating an information portal will nurture successful resilience. Okay, what are the conclusions from this study? Farmer adaptation practices are influenced by many factors. Understanding these factors is important in developing effective and appropriate policies and programs related to climate change adaptation. This study investigates the climate change adaptation and factors driving the adaptation of vegetable farmers in Sri Lanka. There are three commonly used adaptation options, which are early or late planting, switching variety or crop, and intensive use of inputs. So this is where the groundwater mining becomes an issue, and salinization of the groundwater happens with invasion of, Sri Lanka is an island, so ocean water can invade when groundwater is taken out and so on. So intensive use of inputs can also create excessive fertilizer use, loss of soil health, runoff, nutrient pollutions, impact on fisheries, etc. By assessing the drivers of adaptation by the farmers, we identify that several characteristics such as gender of the farmer, education level, farming experience, income of the farmer, and willingness to take credit are important when encouraging farmers towards adaptation. The drivers related to information availability for the farmers, for example, extension on crop, information on climate change, farmer-to-farmer extension, and climate variables themselves are affecting adaptation. Among these factors, education level, willingness to take credit, extension on crops, information on climate change are highly likely to influence farmers' adaptation through policy interventions. So policies themselves have to have these kind of details to make sure that adaptation policies are consistent with what is possible in terms of getting farmers to use the adaptation options. I think this is the last chapter. Oops, not quite. So let me finish this. Resilience through crop diversification in Pakistan. Crop diversification is a potential strategy to enhance community resilience to climate change impacts. It's been known. We lost the simple idea of crop diversification because of income concerns and market forces. Farm size, farmers' risk attitude, and the previous exposure to flood or excessive rainfall influence farmers' decision on crop diversification. Location-specific factors such as soil quality, climatic and agroecological condition determine the extent of crop diversification. Okay, so that's a brief take on resilience through crop diversification. Let's leave this podcast here and come back. I'm pretty sure that's the last section of this book. Okay,